Page 471 of the Church Bibles. Just a little bit of background. David and his men have been told of the Philistines' victory over the army of Israel and the death of King Saul and his 3 sons, including David's close friend Jonathan, who had, in hard times, helped David to find strength in God. 2 Samuel chapter 1, verse 17. David took up this lament concerning Paul and his son Jonathan, and ordered that the men of Judah be taught this lament of the bow. It is written in the book of Jasher. Your glory, O Israel, lies slain on your heights. How the mighty have fallen. Tell it not in Gath, proclaim it not in the streets of Ashkelon, lest the daughters of the Philistines be glad, lest the daughters of the uncircumcised rejoice. O mountains of Gilboa, may you have neither dew nor rain, nor fields that yield offerings of grain. For there the shield of the mighty was defiled, the shield of Saul, no longer rubbed with oil. From the blood of the slain, from the flesh of the mighty, the bow of Jonathan did not turn back. The sword of Paul did not return unsatisfied. Saul, did I say? Saul and Jonathan in life were loved and gracious. In death they were not parted. They were swifter than eagles. They were stronger than lions. O daughters of Israel, weep for Saul, who clothed you in scarlet and finery, who adorned your garments with ornaments of gold. How the mighty have fallen in battle. Jonathan lies slain on your heights. I grieve for you, Jonathan, my brother. You are very dear to me. Your love for me was wonderful, more wonderful than that of women. How the mighty have fallen. The weapons of war have perished. This is the word of God.
Thanks, Al. Well, death is something that confronts us all. There's no denying that, there's no hiding from that, it just does. So how do we respond to death? How do we respond when death confronts us? Do we believe that we can avoid death? Is that our goal? Certainly many people seem to believe that they can do everything that they can to avoid it, to deny its reality, and yet death will still come to them. Or do we just ignore it? It doesn't really matter. It's not really important. And I fear in our time that that's very much the case, that people just don't worry and ignore the reality of death. So, here's my risk. This is a joke. I tell you that just in case it's not funny. 2 blokes, Dale and John, are playing golf. As they stand on the 14th tee, the road next to them, a funeral cortege drives past. Dale stands still, takes off his hat, lowers his head as the hearse drives past. And when they've gone, John turns to him and says, "Wow, that was very respectful of you." And Dale turns to him and says, "Well, she was a good wife for many years." Boom, Tish. Yeah, great joke, right? How we respond to death does reveal the nature of our relationship with that person. How we respond to someone's death reveals our relationship with that person. Think of this, the death of someone, just anyone. Well, we can recognise that that is sad, but my life goes on. It doesn't impact me. I became painfully aware of that with the death of my grandmother. as her coffin was taken out from the church, and we came outside Burwood Road in Hawthorn. And for me, my life had changed dramatically at that moment. And everybody else who drove past, nothing had changed in their life. The death of someone might be sad, and people might have driven past, recognised the coffin, the funeral, people sad, and felt something for that, but it had no material impact on their life. And people treat the death of Jesus in a similar manner. My life goes on. It doesn't affect me at all. The death of Jesus, well, that was so long ago. It affects me no more than the death of any other famous person in history. It just doesn't matter. So how we respond to the death of someone reveals our relationship with that person. How we respond to the death of Jesus reveals our relationship with Him. But the way we respond to death becomes a little different when it is the death of someone I know. When it is the death of someone I know, it impacts me in a different way. Because when I know someone who's died, my heart reacts. And strangely and paradoxically, it can react in two ways at the same time. I can react with pain. I feel the pain of this person's death. I feel the sadness welling up within me, recognizing that this person has died. And yet at the exact same time, I have a sense of joy that I had the delight to know that person. That this wasn't just a name in a newspaper. That this wasn't just someone I see. This was someone I know. It can go the other way as well. There can be the pain of the memories of that person's life and a sense of joy and relief at their death. And I want to acknowledge the reality that some people will feel that way. We come into 2 Samuel and we see a young man who comes to David. He has a message for David, and it's the message that somebody has died. He says to David in verse 4, "The men fled from the battle. Many of them fell and died, and Saul and his son Jonathan are dead." They fled, many fell, but here are these two you need to know about. The two you know, Saul and his son Jonathan, are dead. Now what makes this awkward is that he thinks this is good news for David. And in one sense it makes sense that he would think that, because with Saul now dead, it means that David will be king. The king that he has been promised to be, the king that there's a good chance there's a whole chunk of people have been waiting for David to step into that role. But this young man, this foolish young man, thinks that he can profit from this news. That he can profit from the death of Saul, that he can make something for himself. Now see how he approaches David in verse 2. If you've got your Bibles still open there, and I'd encourage you to do that, in verse 2, he arrives at from Saul's camp. He arrives to David in Ziklag, where David is, and you'll need to go back into 1 Samuel to see why. He comes with his clothes torn and with dust on his head. He came to David. He fell to the ground to pay him honor. At this point, it all seems like things are going as they should go. David needs to know what's been happening up at the battle. But then this silly young man tries to make himself a hero in the story. Now, we already know the account of the death of Saul at the end of 1 Samuel. And if you read the end of 1 Samuel and then read what I'm about to read from 2 Samuel, you will notice there are some distinct differences here. And I think we can take it that what we have at the end of 1 Samuel in chapter 31 is the truth. And what we have in chapter 1 of 2 Samuel is this man trying to put himself into the story. So I read from verse 5. David said to the young man who brought in the report, "How do you know that Saul and his son Jonathan are dead?" Well, I happened to be on Mount Gilboa, the young man said. And there was Saul leaning on his spear, with the chariots and riders almost upon him. When he turned around and saw me, he called out to me, and I said, "What can I do?" He asked me, "Who are you?" "An Amalekite," I answered. Then he said to me, "Stand over me and kill me. I am in the throes of death, but I'm still alive." So I stood over him and killed him, because I knew that after he had fallen he could not survive. And I took the crown that was on his head and the band on his arm, and have brought them here to my Lord. Oh, if only he had told the truth. If only this young man had told the truth of what he'd seen and hadn't tried to embellish it, then maybe he would have been okay, and maybe he wouldn't come to the end that he's about to come to. And I want to say to this young man, you think you'll be welcomed by making yourself a hero in the story of death? And I wonder, do you think to yourself, it's only a small lie? It's only a small sin? Well, this young man is about to meet a very grisly end. And before we get appalled or offended or even angry that he dies just for telling a lie, we should stand in humble astonishment that we don't have that same punishment. That we haven't met that end for our sin. Too often we've stood behind the thought, it's only a small lie, it's only a small sin, it doesn't really matter, as though that settles it and excuses what we do. But this is one of the great tricks of Satan, to convince us that small sins don't matter. So how do we deal with that? Well, consider this. Those sins which we call small, which we read about in the Bible, have brought down the wrath of God immediately, like the eating of an apple, gathering a few sticks on the Sabbath day, touching the ark of God, and we'll come to that in chapter 6 here. So be careful. This young man knew about Saul as king, and I gather he clearly knew about David promised to be the next king. But he thought to treat the death of Saul and Jonathan as a small thing, and it wasn't. And here I say again, people treat the death of Jesus like this. They can make it more about me than about Jesus. And you've probably heard people give their testimony, and some people give a testimony like this because they're immature, and some people give a testimony like this because they're just way too full of themselves. I was like this, and then I met Jesus, and now I'm like this, and now I'm doing this, and now I've been given this. And the fact that Jesus is the key to all of this gets a very short mention. Or others who wonder, can I profit from the death of Jesus? And those who preach a prosperity gospel, and a gospel's the wrong word there, but who preach a prosperity doctrine, seeking to profit from the death of Jesus. How we respond to the death of someone reveals our relationship with that person. How we respond to the death of Jesus reveals our relationship with him. So the death of someone doesn't impact us much. The death of someone we know has a more significant impact. But then we come to this, the death of someone I love. And here we find in 2 Samuel grief expressed. I have seen grief in its rawest form at funerals. I have seen families, couples just distraught with grief. I have seen people who are just silent because they can no longer express the grief that is within them. It's beyond words, it's beyond expression for them to say and to reveal what is in their heart. David's response in his grief is public and it is visible. Look at verse 11. When he's heard that Saul and Jonathan have died, the battle didn't go well for them. David and all the men with him took hold of their clothes and tore them. They mourned and wept and fasted till evening for Saul and his son and Jonathan, for the army of the Lord, the house of Israel, because they had fallen from the Lord. Why don't we grieve like that? Why are we so careful in our grief? Why don't we wail? Why don't we visibly, some of you have seen that, I'm sure. Why don't we visibly reveal our grief? Why are we so nice and neat in our grief? We don't grieve like this. And maybe, just maybe, we're not actually better off for it. David's crew are Israelites. The fate of their friends and their families is unknown to them at this point. And no wonder then that they mourned for Saul, the king, for Jonathan, who I think really could be seen as the glory of Israel at that time, for the army of the Lord, men that they fought with, sometimes fought against, and for the house of Israel. And verse 12 tells us that it lasted until evening. And we might think, oh good, there's a time limit on grief. Excellent. Just till evening and then we can get on with life. We can move on with our lives. More importantly, we can tell others to move on with their lives. Stop crying. Move on. Pull yourself together. But that's not what David does. David does what we don't do. David laments. And I love the English Standard Version here. He lamented with this lamentation. Oh, the poetry of that phrase. He lamented with this lamentation. Why don't we? Why don't we lament? Why don't we have songs for the brokenhearted to sing in church? This week, I was looking for a lament to sing. If you know one, tell me. Song Select, some software that many churches use in choosing songs, getting the music and such, have a list of themes. And there's hundreds of themes there. And the only one that I think could fit under a negative emotion, for want of a better word, was weeping. You won't find lamentation there. You won't find grief. I don't think you'd even find sadness there. Why don't we have songs for the brokenhearted to sing in church? Now, I know the answer to that. I know the answer. We don't sing laments because we have a victory in Jesus. Because Christ has conquered death and we live in the certainty of this. So even when we're feeling sad, we still have a sense that God is in control, everything will be okay, and we want to celebrate the victory of that. But I fear that sometimes we cheapen it by just singing the victory and not the grief that we share. So there was a line in the song we sang earlier, and I need to get the music so I can read it. Come those whose joy is morning sun, and those weeping through the night. Come those who tell of battles won, and those struggling in the fight. I love songs with words like that. I love the reality of it. There is a time and place for lament. Some of you will know Les Mis, the great musical. Think of Marius standing in that empty room, empty chairs and empty tables, and singing. There's a grief that can't be spoken. There's a pain goes on and on. Empty chairs at empty tables. Now my friends are dead and gone. And here is David's response to that same feeling. Now my friend is dead and gone. His initial response: to tear his robes, to weep, mourn, and fast. His thoughtful response is to lament. Now, we should not think that this lament, he just stood up and read it out. There's composition here. There's careful thought. It's to be shared with other people. He laments thoughtfully, and he determines that others learn this lament. 2 Samuel tells us that it's stored in the mysterious and lost book of Jashar. But fortunately for us, the narrator has also recorded it here in 2 Samuel. And as you look on from verse 19, we see the mighty have fallen. And that phrase comes up a few times in this poem. David pleads that there would be silence in Philistia, that the Philistine people would be silent, that they would not rejoice at the death of Saul. Sadly, we know, if you look back a page at the end of 1 Samuel, that's exactly what they are doing. They are celebrating, they are rejoicing. But Paul calls there to be silence in these lands of the enemy. He calls and prays that there will be no life anymore on Mount Gilboa, the place where Saul and Jonathan have died. No dew, no rain, no fields, for there they died. He reflects on the strength of Saul and Jonathan. Their bow, the sword, swifter than eagles, stronger than lions. Let there be weeping for Saul in verse 24. And what a significant difference that is. Let there be silence in Philistia, but in Israel, let there be weeping for Saul, remembering all he has done. And then verses 25 and 26. How the mighty have fallen in battle. Jonathan lies slain on your heights. And then this very personal, which he makes very public, lament. I grieve for you, Jonathan, my brother. You were very dear to me. Your love for me was wonderful, more wonderful than that of women. Now, because it's 2023, I need to say this. If anyone ever says to you that same-sex marriage is okay, and David and Jonathan are an example of that, I choose my words carefully here, tell them they're a fool. They are a fool to come to that conclusion. I've never lived in war. I pray I never will. I pray my sons never will. But I know, for those who have, the deep connection, mateship, dare I call it love, that men have for each other, who have endured hardship and pain and eventual victory together. And it would make sense, even though modern men wouldn't use the term, that they might say to each other, your love for me was wonderful, more wonderful, very different than that of women. But I'll give you this example. This week, I spoke to a dear friend of mine, someone I've worked with, someone for whom I have a huge respect for, and I know he has a huge respect for me. And as we concluded our phone call, he said, I love you, Brian. And I could say to him, I love you too, Brad. Because he's my friend. And then the verses conclude. how the mighty have fallen. The weapons of war have perished. How we respond to the death of someone reveals our relationship with that person. How we respond to the death of Jesus reveals our relationship with him. And so it's right that people respond to the death and react to the death of Jesus in the way that David has reacted to the death of Saul. That my love for Jesus makes me weep at his death. One of the dangers of approaching Easter, Pascal, is that we come to Good Friday, but it's hard for us to recognise the grief of Good Friday because we know what happens on Sunday. And so we're thankful for some of those hymn writers. Isaac Watts, who could write, "Alas, and did my Saviour bleed, and did my Sovereign die? Did he devote that sacred head for such a worm as I?" And then Albert Osborne, the greatest hymn writer you've never heard of. "O love upon a cross impaled, my contrite heart is drawn to thee, and are thine the hands my pride has nailed? And thine the sorrows borne for me? Are such the wounds my sin decrees? I fall in shame upon my knees." But as I meditate day and night on the death of Christ and then his resurrection, I see a victory. David concluded his lament by writing, how the mighty have fallen, the weapons of war have perished. And I want to apply this to Jesus. Earlier I said this, why don't we lament? Why don't we have songs for the brokenhearted to sing in church? Well, there's a very good reason for that. Jesus has conquered death, and we live in the certainty of this. We look at the death of Jesus on that cross at Calvary, and we who recognize him as Lord cry out in lament, how the mighty have fallen. But before we speak the final statement, we remind ourselves that one of the greatest weapons of Satan is what? Our fear of death. One of the greatest weapons of Satan is our fear of death. And what does Jesus do with that weapon? Well, we don't have to ask because Hebrews answers the question for us. In Hebrews chapter 2, from verse 14 to 15, "Since the children have flesh and blood, he, Jesus, he too shared in their humanity, so that by his death he might destroy him who holds the power of death, that is the devil, and free those who all their lives were held in slavery by their fear of death." Jesus has conquered death, and we live in the certainty of this. How the mighty have fallen, we might say when we look at Jesus. But when we look at his victory, we can say the weapons of Satan's war have perished. In Christ we are free. So hear the final verse of that song from Albert Osborne. Again, the greatest hymn writer you've never heard of. "Now take thy throne, O crucified, and be, my love, anointed King. The weapons of my sinful pride are broken. By thy suffering, a captive to love's victories, I yield upon my knees." How we respond to the death of someone reveals our relationship with that person. How we respond to the death of Jesus reveals our relationship with him. How do you respond to the death of Jesus? Death is around us everywhere. For many of us, for most of us, it's unseen and unknown until it's not. Until it strikes close to us and we are left undone by its presence. So we lament, and we should. We lament, we acknowledge a life gone from us. We admit to the pain of empty chairs and empty tables. We weep at the loss of our best friend, and we should, as long as it takes. But one death stands beyond all others. One death has destroyed the weapons of the devil's war. One death we acknowledge as our hope. and that is the death of Jesus. In a moment, we will share in the communion service. We will hold the bread and cup in our hands, and as we do that, we will not just remember what happened for Jesus, though we must, but in holding this, we acknowledge the death of Jesus for me. And if you can't do that, we're glad you're here, but please don't take it. Please don't take it. This is not about the death of someone. This is not the death about someone you know. This is about the death of someone you love. And as Lily urged the children, to love Jesus with all your heart. Let's pray. Our loving God, you speak to us. You call us. You help us. Lord, continue to do just that and more. We pray in your precious name.